Good morning and welcome to Behind the Charts. I'm Celine Joshua, and joining us today are two esteemed experts from Billboard, Silvio and Keith. And we have a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about, of course, the Billboard music charts, what goes into the charts, what doesn't, why does it even matter, and so much more. Please do ask questions. So if you have that app, please do ask questions. If you're watching from home, you can also go to the South by Southwest app. And, we're excited to answer anything that you would like to know. Billboard, of course, is, Billboard music charts, but so much more. So we're going to play a little video before we get started.
It did actually go to the top of the Billboard charts and become a #1 song. That was big.
We've always dreamt of debuting on the Billboard Hot 100.
I have officially had my first song on the top 100 on Billboard.
Of course, I love Billboard.
And Billboard, thank you so much.
When Billboard on Instagram posts that top 10 picture and to see my name so next level.
Benito Martínez, el más hijo de puta.
We're hanging out with the most talented brother-sister duo ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys have that title.
Thank you, Billboard. Viva Puerto Rico!
Thank you. I love you all.
Okay.
Sizzle.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So let's just get started. As I mentioned, we have two esteemed experts, and together, and even individually, there's a wealth of knowledge between Keith and Silvio. So we'd love to get started with just learning about the evolution of the charts, right? There's been so much change with each format, and adaptation is key. And so if you can just walk us through some of those big changes and then everything that you guys have kind of led along the way.
Well, the first Billboard chart, national chart, was 1940. So we've been doing charts for quite some time.
I mean, we haven't been there the entire time.
Almost as long. For decades, it was pretty static on what made up the bulk of our charts. It was sales and airplay, and sales took various forms. Vinyl, cassettes, CDs. Then we went into the digital downloads. But there was an important change in the early 90s where we went from reported airplay and reported sales, where literally the Billboard team at the time would call radio stations and call retail stores, and someone would be on the other side of the phone and say, yes, this is my top selling song, or this is my most played song. But in the early 90s, Nielsen, SoundScan at the time, started a point of purchase tracking system. So whenever you bought an album or a single at a retail store, it would scan it. So for the first time, we had actual sales data. They created a monitoring system where anything that was played on radio was electronically calculated as well. So it was a big sea change in the industry in the early 90s to go from reported play to monitored airplay and tracked sales. So that changed the game for quite some time, but it still was pretty much a sales airplay world. And within the last 10 to 15 years, there's probably been more change than the 4 or 5 decades before that, starting with digital downloads. Billboard was the first to introduce, iTunes data on a national chart, the first charting company in the world to do that. We were the first to incorporate streaming. We started with program streams in not the Napster days, but the Rhapsody, and that morphed into Spotify and Apple, and we were the first to incorporate video plays into the chart with YouTube as well. So we've always been at the forefront of change, and we've always tried to incorporate where music fans are consuming music. And as you guys all know, in the last few years, that's created more opportunities with short-form video and others that we're trying to incorporate into the data set, working with our data partners at Luminate, who do all the aggregating for us. They have the agreements with all the retailers and digital service providers in getting the data. So there's a lot going on with short-form gaming, other facets that we're looking at to continue to modernize the chart and stay ahead of the curve as best as we can.
Did you get all that?
I did. And so with every format change, you have adapted, right? And then especially with the streaming era, every platform has their own ranking, right? Their own chart. And then you go look at social media and everyone has the numbers kind of maybe before you even, have the chance to report and aggregate, right? So when you look at all of that and all the different changes with somebody else having access to the numbers, where does Billboard come into the kind of bigger storyline with the relevancy of even, having the charts roll up?
There's a lot of charts everywhere. I mean, but Billboard has like, I don't know, how many hundreds of charts do we have now? Like,
It's over 200 charts.
yeah, on a weekly basis.
And so for the purpose of our conversation,
Oh, yeah, no,
the
I
top
understand.
200, the Hot 100, the genre charts.
Yeah. We have, I mean, obviously, our sort of two signature charts are the Billboard 200 Albums chart, which has been around since 1956 on a regular weekly basis. I happen to manage that chart, among other charts. And then the Billboard Hot 100 Songs chart, which is our sort of iconic 100 most popular songs in the country, and that's been around since 1958. But we also have a wealth of other charts and zillions of genres that measure streaming and sales and airplay and box score and touring and the most popular artists in the world. But to your point, what you're asking, in a world where we have, Apple's own charts and Spotify charts and YouTube charts and charts and charts and charts and people making their own charts, just fans creating their own charts. I actually did that when I was a kid because I'm crazy. But anyway, we are in this world where there's so many charts. So why are the Billboard charts still important? There's a certain historical legacy that the Billboard charts have. If you're number one on the Hot 100 this past week, Carnival by Ye and Ty Dolla $ign and Rich the Kid and Playboi Carti, they can say that they're number one on the same chart that the Beatles were number one on in the 1960s. If you're number one on the Billboard 200 this past week, like Morgan Wallen was, he can say that he was number one on the same chart that Elvis Presley was number one on.
He broke a record
And
this week.
and that's the other thing too, Sylvia. Like, this past week, Morgan's album, One Thing at a Time, was number one for a 19th non-consecutive week. And that broke the record for the most weeks at number one by a country album. Well, because we have this historical legacy going back decades, we can directly compare him to Garth Brooks' performance in the 90s, or, Elvis Presley or Kenny Rogers. Right. So we have that, and all those other charts are very important in terms of how people measure their success on whatever platform it is. But Billboard is kind of the only one that takes all of those combined and puts it into a big pot and a big chart and say, here's everything together. Yeah. And you combine that with the historical legacy, and you have an incredible combination.
So every week, Keith, you take those numbers and you publish the story, and that's very special, right? So you're able to take the historical information that you have and then let the audience know that throughout that week you rallied for your favorite artists, and here are the results. Okay, so when you look at how fan armies kind of like galvanize throughout the week because they have this information, or they think they have the real-time information, how does that impact the charts?
I mean, today, because we have social media, fans who are passionate about their favorite artists have a way to talk about their favorite artists. And of course, sometimes if you care about the charts, that can become a talking point with fans on social media. Certainly, if I, because I'm old enough, when I was a kid, we didn't have social media. And so, if you found another friend that liked the same artist that you did, you would be fully consumed by talking about that artist with them all the time. Now, today, we just have social media that can amplify that, and you can find other fans to talk about the charts and talk about, gosh, wouldn't it be great if so-and-so hit the chart or hit number one? And, I remember when I was little, I would call my local radio station and ask them to play a song because I thought, well, I like this song. I want everyone else to hear it, and maybe that'll help them. That's what people are doing today. That's
now
what
you
fans
just
are doing
post,
today.
And then you...
And now, today it's different.
Right.
Yeah, it's Keith's phone call on steroids now. So it's it's a different world. And when I was talking about the methodology change, when it was just charts that were based on sales and airplay, on a sales metric, we get you once. If you went into a store, if you went to buy a download, we only knew what you did for that one time. We didn't know how you interacted with that vinyl or CD, or how many times you played the download. So the charts behave differently, right? It was a turnstile. We get you once, going in and out, you're counted for, thank you, unless you wanted to go buy it again. Now with streaming, there's the repetitive nature. So it's changed the dynamics of fans and how they mobilize and how they try to help their artists. But even taking that out and just going on an organic level, we're measuring repetition. So that changes how the charts behave and the dynamics of how long songs appear on the charts, stay in the top 10, or maybe move quickly in and out of the top 10.
Or
as
come
opposed
back.
Or come back. I mean, yeah, the charts have been full of comeback stories from Kate Bush and
Lady Gaga's Bloody Mary.
thanks to TikTok and social media. Now, it's important to note that the TikTok data is not currently part of the charts, but it influences what is happening on the charts. I'd like for those who were around in the MTV era, MTV at the time was not contributing to what made up the Hot 100, but what was happening on MTV sure did, because airplay would follow and sales would follow. Today with TikTok, similar dynamic. Things are blowing up there. People are going to start streaming it, maybe buying the track. So, there's influences all over the place as to what is ending up at the top of the charts.
Okay, so you mentioned TikTok, and so TikTok's not included, but clearly a lot of fan engagement there. And fans go to shows. They watch their favorite artists' TV performance. They do so much in other areas of the music business that have really big engagement, right? So how do those data points factor or not factor into the chart metrics?
Well, it's not for lack of want for us to have some of these data points. I mean, even at the outset of streaming, it took a while to get some of the platforms on board, because you need to have a willing partner to share the data. So TikTok and some of the other short form video services are somewhat guarded about what is happening on their platform. We did collaborate with TikTok to launch a specific TikTok partnership chart. So there's a Billboard TikTok chart each week, that measures what's happening on their platform. But in terms of rolling into our charts, it doesn't directly impact, but everything that is happening on all these platforms, YouTube Shorts, Reels, all of that is reflected in the other metrics that do.
Yeah, so UGC is so crucial to discovery, right? But I agree that in the sense that it also influences if you go to the platforms that do have the data points that roll up into the charts and affects an artist's, position on either the Hot 100 or the top 200 and so much more. I was going to ask why it's not included, but we will pass that question up.
I think I just answered that.
No,
didn't
I know. So, okay, so TikTok, again, a couple of years, maybe, what are we, 4 or 5 years into?
Well, let's see what happens over the next few weeks, and
Right.
then we'll see what we do with TikTok.
Okay. There's going to be, and there is right now, so much change in the way audiences are discovering and interacting with music. Music has long been part of gaming. You're seeing, the ignition really light up when it comes to Roblox and Fortnite. Immersive experiences could possibly be the next music video, right? And the way in which young fans are interacting with their favorite artists. So when you think about all of the changes you guys told us from, what was it, the 1940s?
Yeah.
Okay. So future forward, music discovery across these types of mediums and platforms. What do the music charts look like from here?
Oh God, I don't know. It's as soon as we when download started, we're like, all right, we're good for the next 20 years, right? We finally have portability in our music, and and I think
that was 10 years.
Yeah, that was 10 years.
Streaming was 5.
Right, and I mean, and streaming is morphing into something
We'll
else.
just have a chip in our head in a few years, and we'll be done.
Yeah,
we'll get the data directly from you.
If you think it will count it towards the chart, that's where we're going to end up being at some point. But it's interesting. What makes the job that Keith and I and the rest of the chart team has very unique. It's we're certainly not just sitting back. We're always thinking about what's next, but also how it impacts the chart, and we have to be very careful on some of these metrics, because we want to make sure that whatever we're bringing into the chart is able to be validated in a way where we know what is happening, and it's not always easy.
Yeah.
To confirm that type of certain platforms and how people are using it, because there are avenues for people to abuse the data for the purpose of chart gain. So there's all interesting conversations, and we're open to whether it's creating new charts to measure these kinds of new consumption and possibly folding it into our legacy charts, at some point when we're confident in the data that we're getting and we feel that it's representative of, like a lot of the music and releases that are out there, not maybe specific to a few artists who can benefit from being on that platform.
Sure. So I've had the privilege of being on the other side, right? And so to know that
The evil label side? No?
That's a joke, everyone. That's a
We've
joke.
known each other for way too long.
We've known
we
each
never
other.
practiced that. Why would you say? No, just kidding. I'm joking. So
That'll be the highlight clip that everyone
Evil
has.
no, look, I feel like you're on the side of the artist, and you absolutely want to fight for every piece of engagement that happens for their body of work. And so what happens on the Billboard side is you absolutely keep the charts pure and credible, right? So that
We're like the commissioner or the umpire, right? We set and part of my role is, and Keith's role, we set the methodologies. We work with the industry. We have discussions with the content creators on the types of eligibility that would count towards a chart. So we're all working off of the same playbook, but it's a playbook that continues to morph and change as consumption changes. So like a sports league, we create new rules and new guidelines, eligibility qualifications. So
and I've seen the openness, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the willingness to see the various ways in which new audiences discover music and consume music. But you sit in such a unique place where you see everyone's data points. So those patterns and those trends, are week on week across your desk, so to speak. What patterns do you see? How do you recognize the various changes that happen even before somebody else spots them? What would you tell an artist or a label or an artist manager about, just the data sets in general and the upcoming trends and patterns?
Wow, that's a lot. I find myself getting lost in data when I look through. So Luminate is our partners who collect most of the data that goes into the charts. In fact, Luminate has a panel or a presentation coming up a little bit later. I'm not pimping them out. I'm just saying. And I, as a chart geek and a chart stan, will often just sort of get lost in the numbers each week. I will easily, much like you get lost in a great book or a TV show or you binge watch something, I will go into Luminate's platform, which is called Connect. And it's just this amazing website that has every number you can think of. And I will fall into a rabbit hole where I'm like, well, what happened in this DMA? Well, I wonder what happened that week. Well, let me cross-reference. Let me put out a few spreadsheets and start and then suddenly 3 hours later, I've lost myself. So, and that's just very basic, sort of simple information that anyone in the industry can access. So if I'm doing that, imagine what professionals like you have been doing a lot better than I have to actually help the artists that you've been working with. I'm just looking at it when I need to sort, like you were talking about the stories that we tell and the stories that we write. We have an entire staff of people that write stories each week about the current week's charts, as well as putting into context things that have happened on our charts over the past decades. Typically, I will use Connect or other means of data, points that are given to me to help tell the story of, well, why is something moving up the chart? Why is someone number one? Why did something fall down the chart? Because people wonder well, how in the world did this thing go from number 1 to number 32 the next week? We have to explain that because otherwise it looks kind of like, well, what happened? So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question.
No, you did, but
but you're saying the data is out there, so the labels have it, artist management has it, people who follow chart social accounts are putting it together.
They're scraping data.
They're scraping the data, and where it gets complicated is depending on where they're getting it, because obviously if you're at a label, you're getting reports directly from Spotify and Apple.
Yeah, and you're getting data that we don't actually see that same type of data either.
And they report different ways. What they report to you, because it's based on you being the labels, to a label or management, it's based on what they're paying out to the label, which is not necessarily everything that rolls into the charts. There's different parameters and of what counts, what is chart eligible, and what the labels see. So, it does get complicated as the week progresses, where there might be an expectation from the label artist manager that they are going to be number X on the chart, and after things shake out, after validation is done, those numbers may change, and any slight change would affect the rank, and then that's where the confusion is, and the phone calls start on the weekend, and we process charts on a weekend because the data ends on Thursday. So there's been many holidays where holiday weekends or just a general Sunday where we're having conversations
Right.
about why things went wrong. We hardly get the conversations about why things went right. It's all about why things went wrong. So
Because they have a view,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah, yeah.
you have
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
the
like,
complete.
there will be all sorts of like conversations that will happen where a manager or a label will send us an email saying, well, I'm looking at this data that I got directly from so-and-so provider, but that's not matching necessarily what I'm seeing in Luminate. It's like, well, you have to remember you're getting a different slice of the data from the provider directly. They're giving you maybe everything they're paying you out for, or maybe everything that is even someone playing something for 2 seconds as opposed to, an actual full play. So sometimes there's confusion as to how the data is, used or versus, what we use it and what is given to the, actual rights holder. That said, all the rights holders and the labels understand our chart rules. They have access to them, so none of that is a secret. It just sometimes takes a lot of explaining when you have someone who's angry or not understanding about the numbers.
Sure.
You have to guide them through how they're actually used.
Well, you have a variety of important charts, right? We have the top 200, which makes up the album consumption, the Hot 100, and then all of the various genres.
we launched the global 200 a few years ago, which has been a great success for us. So being able to gather all the big global DSPs together into a global ranking has been great. And Billboard has launched. We have licensees in different territories, and we've launched charts for example, Billboard Arabia, Billboard Thailand, Italy, Canada, Japan has been a longstanding partner. So we've certainly globalizing the Billboard charts, and there's going to be a lot more territories to announce this year too. So it's
Teasing territories.
it's we're, as you can see from the video, we got our hands in a lot of different things. So it's been a great few years.
Sure. Is there a genre chart that's maybe over-indexing and growing faster than some of the others?
Oh, I mean, so I wrote, every year when Luminate puts out their year-end report, I usually tend to do a couple 1,000-word story, kind of recapping kind of like the major data points. Last year, and actually the past few years, the genre that is really kind of over-indexing in terms of strong gains percentage-wise has been, we categorize it as world music, but the reason why world music was over-indexing was because that contains K-pop. So K-pop has been over-indexing the past few years, actually like the past 10 years really, and it continues to grow. And for a long time, it was mostly just like CD sales, but there actually was significant gains in streaming in the past year or two with K-pop. For a while, I mean, the genre was having a harder time like getting big streaming numbers, but there have actually been a number of hits that have actually had great impact on some of our streaming charts from K-pop artists. So that would be like one of the genres.
And I mean, Latin and country have just. I mean, we introduced our equivalent of the Hot 100 for the genre charts over 10 years ago, and when we did, country and Latin were really still based on just most of the points were coming from radio and sales, and not so much from streaming. I mean, the past few years, as you can tell, with the top of the Billboard 200 Hot 100, ton of Latin titles, ton of country titles. So those two genres have really skyrocketed as well the past couple of years.
So you mentioned some of the formats, and what artists love to do is they like to introduce consumer products and allow fans to purchase, different types of products on their sites, including music, right? And so their D2C sales are part of that rollout that happens for a new release. If you can just walk us through the criteria of what D2C impact has on a weekly chart or an ongoing chart for an artist.
Well, I mean, I think we all have probably purchased something from an artist's web store, because so much of that is now kind of focused on an artist having a direct connection with fans and leading them to their web store or their website for whatever the reason may be, or just maybe purchasing something through like Instagram directly as an example. But all of those sales can be considered to be reported to Luminate and then filter into the charts. Like for example, like Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande all have versions of their albums that I think you can only purchase from their web store, and those sales count towards our charts. And in fact, like some artists wildly over-index in terms of the amount of music that they sell on their web store versus what might be generally available at brick and mortar retail. And some artists just bypass releasing physical music to brick and mortar altogether, and they will only have it on their web store. And that may be for a variety of reasons, but a lot of it I would assume is that they can't probably produce enough to distribute widely, and it's easier for them to just have it centrally distributed just through their web store. But yeah, all that still counts towards our charts.
Well, there's a lot of platforms that allow artists to be able to sell like any type of merch. Like, you know, YouTube has their merch shelf. Spotify's also, you know, rolling out the ability to kind of have your super fan have access to special merch, and that rolls up into engagement. And so I feel like, you know, every year, a couple times a year, I'm sure you get the question as to, you know, how can we create these bundles that help tell the story of how much fans interact with an artist's consumption. But it always goes back to the album. So I get that part. Talk to us a little about the significance of like debuting or even going #1 on the Hot 100 and what all of that makes up.
Well, you can, you know, with some of the artists on the video, you can see the importance that it has to them. I mean, we're thrilled that after doing this for so long, you know, as a brand, that the charts still resonate today. And I'd have to say, I've been there quite some time. I feel the passion is probably as strong as it's ever been on an artist level, because I think, you know, social media has helped sort of amplify the success to the masses, and it's great. Listen, you know, there's such a fervor to get to #1 on the charts, and it causes us, you know, some long weeks and some long weekends, and when things are tight and it gets, you know, there's arguments maybe happening or discussions happening, but at the end of the day, we're thankful that, you know, people get angry with us and get happy with us, because we'd rather they care than not care, right? The last thing we wanted, you know, somebody to be is just like, whatever, we don't, you know, whatever I end up. We want them to matter. So, you know, as Keith mentioned before, there's just the legacy to it, and you know, it's competitive between artists. It's someone who is setting records, wants to continue to set records. It was amazing, you know, incredibly, like in December, we were on the phone all through the weekend in a tight race to #1 on the Hot 100 between a 30-year-old song and a 60-year-old song. It was Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas and Brenda Lee's Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. Like, we're having heated discussions about this chart tight race for a 60-year-old song. And when it was announced that Brenda ended up being #1 after sitting at #2 for prior holiday seasons, and we have it on video if you search it.
And this had never been #1 before.
Yeah, never been #1.
And she herself hadn't been #1 since the 1960s.
Like 90?
She's
she's in the 70s. And I mean, she was almost brought to tears when we captured on video of Trisha Yearwood actually telling her she finally hit #1 with Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, and she, you know, almost broke down into tears. And you know, when you see that, right, you see that passion from some of the new artists, and then you see it from Brenda Lee, and you know, that's where it gets to you that you know, what we're doing matters to people, and it's great to see that passion.
There's something I noticed, and I sort of shared this before with people, but it's interesting to see how, like when I was younger and when Sylvia was younger, you didn't know, like the charts were sort of just like an industry thing, like
a weekend radio countdown.
Yeah, like you became familiar with charts or Billboard if you maybe turned on the countdown on Sunday to listen to Casey Kasem or Shadow Stevens or Rick Dees or whoever it was, Ryan Seacrest, as I continue to just name check a bunch of DJs. And maybe you became aware of the Billboard brand because Billboard, you know, put out albums that had like the top hits of a particular year, but you didn't necessarily know how the charts worked. It was in this industry magazine that was really expensive to subscribe to. There wasn't a website. Like, you wouldn't know. And maybe you would find out information about it later. With social media, now people, and with our website, of course, people can actually access and interact with the data and see the charts and touch and feel them and become more familiar with them. The other thing that I've noticed as a fan, like when I was younger, I remember how generally speaking, artists wouldn't talk necessarily about their chart achievements. It was different, and I think that changed in the '90s to a certain degree. I remember Mariah Carey often would be very proud of the fact that she had the most number ones of any soloist on the Hot 100, and she would put that in her press releases and her biographies, and then that led to, and then I promise I'll shut up, or maybe I won't. That led to this is where we just start hitting each other. It'll be great. That led to compilation albums that were based around how many number ones you had on the Hot 100. Mariah Carey put out a number ones album that was just her number ones on the Hot 100. The Beatles put out the One album, which was just their number ones on the Hot 100 and the official UK chart. Elvis did the same thing. They became our chart is the chart that people became familiar with through all those means, and fans became aware of them. So, clearly we've done an okay job making sure that people understand what the charts are about and why they're important. But it is weird how the Billboard charts seem to be more popular than they ever have been, which is, it sounds like I'm just sort of hyping them, but it does feel that way.
Well, Celine, let me ask you a question, because you've been on the other side of on the label side and game planning with an artist for a release, or walking them through the week of release, where their expectation from you as a label is to deliver number one and to be a number one. So, you tell us from some of the artists that you dealt with, how much importance did they put on that?
Well, depending on the artist, I will always say that though we had the most organic and authentic rollout, right? So what's
They all say that. They all say it's very organic and authentic.
No, right, but in the sense of how you're marketing it, where you're going, what story are you trying to tell, and what's the biggest impact and best way to roll it out. And then, yes, there are some artists that absolutely, the North Star and the target is that number one, and you can always back into the number, right? And throughout the week, you can understand where you are, and you can forecast, not knowing maybe the competitors' numbers, if you will, but you can always forecast, and building a plan that over-delivers, right? So you can hit those numbers. When it comes to the Hot 100, though, right, because there's other measuring sticks, I've been on the side where each of those data sets, so if it's radio, if it's download, if it's streaming or whatnot, everyone gets their targets, and we give it everything that we got, because it's important to deliver that number one for the artist, right? But it's also to deliver an incredible rollout for audiences,
no
and
matter
then
what
it's
the
up
chart
to them.
position is.
Yeah. And if you don't get it that week, I think what social has done and what virality has done and what UGC and the way that the artist fans take over is that you can come back 5 years later and have a number one. Or it's the 70 years.
70 years.
Beyonce debuted at 2, right? The first week with Texas, and then it went
Yeah.
to number one the second week, right?
Yeah.
So there's always that ability.
And Ye's Carnival did the same thing. It debuted
Yeah.
at number 2 and then fell down and came back.
On the label side, or if you're here as an artist manager, or maybe you're here as even an artist yourself, you have to have a plan, and be active in that plan. And some artists just want to deliver the album, and as they should, and then be the artist, and then their team takes over and understands, where do we want to be, how do we want to impact the charts, but also how do we want to talk to audiences. And I'm a big fan of every content creates new content, and that UGC is powerful, right? And discovery is powerful across their various platforms. And by the way, people discover music based on the charts, right?
We didn't talk about that.
that
Going to the
creates
charts as a discovery tool, sure.
Yeah. And every week, Keith, on what is it, a Sunday, Saturday, you tell a story.
Yes.
And we have chart managers, people on the chart team that oversee certain genres. So not only is Keith putting up his
I'm not the only person. There's a whole team of people that are writing stories.
So our rock chart manager, Kevin, who's here, and he manages streaming charts too. He's putting up stories specific to those charts, and we do that for Latin country, et cetera. So we're continuing. Billboard as a brand is about exposing new artists as best we can. We have an emerging artist chart. We make sure that for the events that we have, that we incorporate new and up and coming artists. and we want to shine a light on everyone. It's not all about number ones, not
Yeah,
all
no,
about top tens.
It's not just Mariah Carey versus Brenda Lee. It's we have a whole host of charts that just shine a light on emerging artists, new and developing artists, and we have stories specifically. I mean, there's a story that runs every week about
First time.
yeah, first timers, like artists that are reaching any Billboard chart for the very first time.
Love that.
And
And the artists, they respond and they
the-
get super excited.
I feel like that story and that that achievement actually gets more attention from artists than lots of other stuff that happens on the charts.
Like,
Because
somebody's top 10, they're like, okay.
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
for somebody's first time
it's
ever.
like first time on any Billboard chart. They are recording a video, they're posting it on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they are screaming their heads off because they made the Billboard chart.
Sure.
That's incredible. That's incredible for them, and it's also incredible for us, obviously, as a brand. But also, it still means that we're doing something right.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I will tell you, having the privilege to work with incredible artists, the most favorite part is breaking an artist, right? Their first time of getting on the chart, or their first time of maybe even a TV performance, and so many. And so that's a very special part of an artist's journey. If you haven't already gone into the app to ask questions, please do. Maybe we haven't covered something that you would like to know. And if you're, if you're watching from home, you can always go to the South by Southwest Go app and do the same. And so I'm just going to we have maybe about 20 minutes left, and we'll probably get to 15 minutes of questions. What I'd like to kind of shift to is how you protect the charts, right? When it comes to so much AI and so much social hacking, and the B word, bots.
Bots.
VPN and bots.
Yeah, and and this stuff matters, right? Because you have to be able to kind of audit, and I'm going to let you go through your process, but I just want people to know that there is a process, right? That there is that due diligence, and so walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-pronged process. I mean, it starts with the DSPs who have their own spam filters or recognitions to make sure that what they're passing along to Luminate, which then gets passed along to us, has been put through the ringer and verified. Our team on the chart staff looks at activity throughout the week, and we might spotlight certain trends that do not look like they're performing under the normal trend lines, and we'll surface that with Luminate and do some due diligence and follow up with some of the providers. There's also retail checks that happen. There's, again, there's general behavior for titles, whether they're new or have been in release for the past few weeks, where you can get a sense of how the week should progress, and maybe there might be sales over indexing at a certain retail outlet or a certain DSP or in certain DMAs, and the DMAs just like the city is
Designated market
right?
area.
There's like why are most of the sales coming from Alaska, or most?
Why
of
are
the
they so popular in Anchorage?
Right.
Yeah.
Anchorage seems a hot spot for some activity.
Hot spot. Yeah.
So yeah, we look at those things, and we don't really care to point fingers as to why that is happening or who's engaging to make that happen, and we just want to make sure that we catch it. Not to say that we won't follow up with with the content owner and say, hey, did you
notice this?
Right. So, yeah, it's we feel like what is represented on the chart is as accurate and complete as can be. We're not so naive to think that there aren't things that are flowing through that shouldn't be, but I don't it's not to the extent that that will determine one of the top spots. But we're constantly mindful of that, and as I mentioned earlier, as we're trying to onboard new data platforms, we want to make sure that we're bringing in those platforms that we have confidence in. Sure. At the end of the day.
Okay, so I want to first thank you for answering and sharing a little bit more through that process. We're going to get into some questions, and then we'll go from there. Silvio, you talked about the globalization of or adding a lot of the global consumption that's happening around the world, and so in regard to that, somebody would like to know if
we're looking at questions. By the way,
we're looking at. I'm looking at the ground.
We're all squinting at a monitor.
Will there be more expansion into the Southeast Asian countries like the Philippines?
Yes, we are looking at many territories many of the Asian territories. It's a big priority for us, and there's a lot of excitement coming there. So I have my international licensing team here, and they are working ever so hard and bringing opportunities to our company to create Billboard brands there, and hopefully charts if the data can support it. Not every territory right now is able to have charts that we feel confident in, but we're working with partners to build those out if they don't already exist.
How does Billboard monetize their charts? Who pays you?
Who pays me?
Well, who pays?
I'm still trying to find out.
Well, you pay me. and
Do you even monetize the charts?
Yeah, I mean, the traffic that goes to Billboard.com is turned into
It's the advertising.
Yeah, we got advertising from that.
Well,
Subscriptions,
licensing.
Licensing is huge for us. As I'm, creating charts for our licensees internationally.
Indirectly, like the Billboard Music Awards, or those are based upon chart performance. So it is interesting though. It's not unlike if you're an editorial at our magazine, you can say, well, I sold this many pages, or I wrote this many stories, and it had this much traffic. The charts are a little bit different because there's so many different ways they can be monetized and sort of, reach, different people.
Yeah, and the charts touch, a lot of what we do. A lot of the events that we have are based on, the collateral of the charts and who we engage with to be part of these events. It all ties back to.
But they're not sponsored. It's not like the Hot 100 is sponsored by Subaru. No, it's not.
No, we never had a sponsored chart in that way. But I mean, a lot of what Billboard does is comes out of the the charts and the importance of the charts.
Of course. Okay. So, Keith, this one's for you.
Oh, wow.
What's your favorite chart stat? And by the way, I do hope we get more questions just about your favorite stories, because you've seen so much over the years. So, what's your favorite chart stat?
There's too many, and I'll just start rambling for a while. But
It has to do with Madonna.
I mean, sure, she's my queen. That's not the secret. I love her to pieces.
Yeah, search online, you'll find.
Well, I'll relate a short story. It'll turn into a 20-minute story, but we don't have that much time. Part of my role at Billboard is that sometimes I get to do a lot of editorial focusing things, where I may do a red carpet or talk to people backstage at an event. And I was backstage at the Billboard Music Awards in 2019, and I was doing interviews on video for Billboard. And Madonna happened to be there performing for the show, doing her new single at the time. And she came back, and we had arranged to speak with her, and I was thrilled because, it's Madonna. Yeah, I mean, come on, who wouldn't be? And during the course of our conversation, it came up that she was going to be going on tour soon. And I said, well, can you make a consideration for something? She's like, what, do you have a song request? I'm like, well, sort of. And I said, well, you've had 38 top 10 hits, on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. And at the time, that was a record. And I said, it's a record. And she's like, well, I want more. And I'm like, well, we're working on that. Like, sort of the we meaning collectively the world. It's not like I can do it.
The Madonna fans are working.
Yeah, the Madonna fans are hard at work on that. And she was like, well, you can make it happen. I'm like, well, I can't do that, Madonna. I don't have that power. She's like, sure you do. I'm like, I don't. We can move on from this. But I thought it was funny how that's the chart stat I like the most. Anything relating to Madonna. That's a very, I just missed the whole point of the question. I just want to tell a story about Madonna. But she did at one point have the most top 10 hits on the Hot 100 chart until Drake, I believe, came along and smashed that. But, she's still the queen of my charts.
And the three of us just saw her in LA, and she was incredible.
Yeah.
So
this is not the Madonna panel, but if only.
But it should
We got 16 minutes.
It should
we
be.
can. If there's any more questions about Madonna, I'm here.
Somebody wants to know where they can even find the chart eligibility rules. Like, if you're an artist or a manager, is there somewhere where you can learn about?
Yeah, I mean, almost all of our rules. Well, for the industry, anyone that's in the industry that has access to Luminate, our partners that collect the data, they have an entire.
But I'm an independent. I don't have a label.
Oh,
I don't have anything. Where do I go?
Well, this literally happens daily. the chart managers, the whole team of chart managers at Billboard, as well as Illuminate itself, get all sorts of emails from independent artists, independent managers, independent labels who say, I don't have access to Illuminate, I don't have a subscription, how do I get the information to make sure that I set up my project accordingly? And we understand that not everyone can necessarily be a major and afford all the money that it may take to subscribe to something. So we, of course, say, of course, we'll send you all the rules, we'll print out a PDF, whatever you need, because we want to be as helpful as possible to help guide people to do the right things to make the charts.
But to be kind of just a little bit more direct, if they are an approved platform, they're eligible to count towards the charts, like a Spotify and Apple.
Oh, yeah.
And there's various DSP platforms. Some of the calculations as it relates to D2C, that rolls up in there. If you're talking about the Hot 100, then you include radio airplay and so much other eligibility. I like this one. So Jeremy Lowe wants to know.
Jeez.
Oh, Jeremy.
Wait, do we know Jeremy? I'm not
Yes.
going to ask that question then.
No,
we
we
don't.
love Jeremy.
Okay, well, Ben Weaver asked a good question too, but as anticipation grows for the weekly charts, have you thought about releasing a midweek chart?
It's come up.
We sort of had something-ish like it a long time ago.
And we stopped.
Well, we stopped. Well, no, we had a sort of midweek Billboard 200 chart, and it was just like the top 10. And we had it for a while, but the problem was midweek data can be very misleading sometimes because someone may be wildly ahead after a few days, and then at the end of the week, well, they were front loaded, and then they're not number one, and then you have to deal with a lot of sort of
not
disappointment.
all the data is updated daily. There's usually a lag time between when the DSPs provide the data to Illuminate.
There's always a couple of days lag time
So,
when we get streaming
like,
information.
On a Wednesday, you can have Apple from Tuesday, but you might not have Spotify from Tuesday. So what does Wednesday really represent, right? So, and as for editorial reasons, I've always felt that you're sort of cutting off the anticipation of what the full week is by announcing a midweek. And yes, we know there are chart accounts out there that are doing the predictions and building that excitement and talking about it. But
Is there one that got it wrong? That was so big, and then you guys had the.
There's, and it's a lot of the artists and managers follow these accounts because they're trying to gain insights, and again, they don't have all the validated data, they don't have all the sources loaded. So yeah, we've had issues where, when the final charts are announced, they're like, "What? Well, we were supposed to be number one. What happened?"
We saw on the internet that we were going to be X, and you say we're not.
And some artists think these are sites that are fully representative of Billboard, and they're not. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why we don't do midweek, because we want to be as accurate as possible, and we don't feel we can do that until the end of the week. Some countries have midweek charts, but some countries are 10% the size of the United States. So there's a lot of data to process.
So I'm going to ask this question, but feel free to pass.
Oh, okay.
How is the Hot 100 calculated in 2024? And the only reason why I said pass is because I know you can't, there's the methodology and all that.
The methodology is out there for those in the know. I mean, I'm not going to, when we don't publicize for the Hot 100, we don't publicize exactly what the math is, but, we incorporate streaming, sales, and radio airplay. And, there's a certain percentage for the entirety of the chart that we try to create a formula for that data to represent. And sometimes how that data is, how fans are interacting with those data points determines how strong an input they are in the chart. So when iTunes was the main focus of music consumption, sales was a heavy portion of the chart. Now streaming is, obviously. So streaming makes up the bulk of the chart, probably 3/4, if not more, of the chart, and then the rest of it is made up of, in order, radio airplay, and sales is the lowest percentage because generally sales have declined, by quite a bit over the last few years. So, you take streams, you divide it by X and Y. We split out streams for both the Billboard 200 and all of our charts between paid subscription streams and ad-supported streams. So paid subscription streams way more than ad-supported. And streams in general just count more than airplay, which counts more than sales. I mean, obviously every song is different, and there are some songs that might have an equal split between airplay and sales if they become big radio hits. I mean, airplay and streams if they become big radio hits. There might be some songs that over-index in sales in certain weeks that don't have a lot of streams. But the entirety of the chart is about three quarters or more streams.
And we have, not in terms of how the chart is actually put together, the recipe, the methodology, that's evaluated, on a regular basis, at intervals in time. So it's not like we're changing the rules every week. They are evaluated at set points in time in the future. So, and we generally try to time that to a nice convenient time in the calendar where okay, it's the beginning of the year, and now we have new chart rules for these charts. We don't just sort of, here's a new rule that we just decided to just try tonight. That's
the Billboard 200, general formula, it's part of Keith's story every week, and it's a revenue reflective model that was collaborated on with the industry. It's similar to what's done in other countries as well, so it's a little bit more rigid than the Hot 100.
Well, that is incredible insight and truly behind the charts. So to understand the methodology that particularly goes into the Hot 100, Jim Pagan wants to know that what's the margin of error, especially when it comes to fan armies in K-pop?
Not sure I understand what margin of error means.
I mean, we don't know. I mean, we like to think that what the final number is the right number. Yeah. So we don't say, we don't have comparisons as to what's not the right number. And there's fan activations where fans are saying I want to help my artist and I'm going to stream and I'm going to stream it as much as I can. And there's certain levels where after a certain amount of streams per person that
the DSPs will just
DSPs
be like,
sort of cap at a certain level. So we don't, there's no problem with someone being, using the right methods to listen to music.
Yeah.
Where, what we try to guard against is.
He's asking you, is there a margin of error? And I've never.
I mean, you're dealing with numbers. There's always a margin of error with numbers, right?
But when it comes to going number one and number two, what's the closest chart race you've seen in terms of numbers? It's not somebody
it's a point
beat them out by 1 unit.
Well, the Hot 100 is a point system, so it's harder to gauge. I mean, albums or units.
On the album chart, it's a little bit more straightforward, just because since 1991, the album chart has been based on either pure album sales, and then we transitioned to a very confusing sort of unit total that combines traditional album sales and streams.
It turns streamings into an album sale
unit,
equivalent.
yeah,
unit.
But I mean, there have been lots of close races at number one on the Billboard 200 throughout time, and those are really obvious because we publish the numbers and you can see the numbers. You can just see how close something was, and that's why I was speaking of this earlier. When people reach out to me and ask for guidance or help on chart rules or whatever it is, I always try to be as helpful as possible, because I know that a couple hundred sales or a couple million streams can make all the difference on my chart, and in turn on many of our charts. So yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we're not going to name names, but there's been some very close races. Yeah.
If I can say but those are my favorite ones. When you're in that race and you've kind of forecasted what maybe your competitor and the other artist is doing and how close it becomes. The teams that come together to just push it across the line.
Well, it was generally always the case even before streaming, but because you're seeing the week progress, it's always interesting for Keith, myself, and the team to see what levers are going to be pushed the rest of the week, right? So it could be as, all right, now we're going to go to cut the 90,
the price.
The 129 single on iTunes to 69 cents.
There's a new deluxe iteration of the album on my web store.
Or we're going to put a new
bonus tracks out.
Bonus tracks on the album.
Sped up, slowed down, a cappella instrumental.
In the 90s, in the mid 90s, there was two highly competitive superstar artists that were battling for number one. And they cut their one cut their physical singles to 49 cents, and then someone else did. I mean, ultimately we things like that lead us to say, okay, now we're going to have to put a minimum pricing rule in place because these kind of gameships are happening during the week. But it's always interesting to see how people are reacting as the week progresses to try to gain an upper hand.
And so we got about 5 more minutes, and there's a lot of questions coming in. Kelly Young, what's the number one piece of feedback, whether if it's positive, negative, that you get about the marquee charts as they're currently set up? So if we're thinking about the top 200 and the way they're set up as far as the methodology or the Hot 100.
I think, you know, it's, the struggle we have is in trying to figure out what the charts are supposed to represent, right? Is it, you know, for the album charts, again, the industry tried to push for a revenue reflective model. And I know you know, we discussed earlier this week, like, have you ever tried going to a revenue model, right? But, you know, for us, it's supposed to be a popularity chart. And measuring how albums are consumed in a world where most of the streaming is most of the activity is happening on streaming, it makes it more difficult to really judge the album entity as its own, you know, product. And so, you know, dealing between popularity versus fandom, you know, we get arguments from the industry or comments from the industry. It's like, well, you should be measuring this kind of activity because it shows how much the fans love the artist. And well, we have an artist chart for that, but you know, how do we truly measure that someone wants to engage with the album and the music on the album and not just like prop up the artist that they love the most to do well on the chart? I mean, that applies to the Hot 100 too.
I was just going to say, if you're going to go to another question, can we do the one on the bottom?
Anonymous?
Yeah, the anonymous
That seems
person.
You don't get to
ominous.
pick.
Well, no, I mean,
Just kidding.
when you read the question.
Well, the bottom one moved just
That would
now.
move
Where did
now.
okay,
Right
it's,
there.
anonymous. Okay,
Where'd it go?
anonymous. This
Oh,
is
there, on top, there you go.
yeah. This is a good question. In terms of collecting sales data from artist sites, does Billboard leverage specific APIs for services like Shopify, or is it manual submission from artists?
So you can use a Shopify plugin on your artist web store, and then that can then be plugged into a provider that provides to Luminate. So there's lots of artists that we know that use Shopify, and then they report their sales through a provider that is an approved provider of sales data to Luminate. So it wouldn't be a manual submission from a web store because there needs to be a set of validation that happens for your sales to be scrubbed essentially before they get to Luminate. So there is a process, but it's not that difficult. So if you are an artist and you happen to be listening to this, there's a simple way that you can get your sales to count from your web store.
About Chloe.
You like Chloe? Okay, I was looking through the top 100 and noticed there's a lack of rock and pop among
Punk.
others.
Punk.
What did I say? Pop?
Pop.
Excuse me, punk. Is that based on general listing or by those who make the chart?
Oh, it's not us. We all love to put our own favorites up there. No, it's interesting because that's a true statement. I mean, you know, rock is one of the most consumed genres on streaming platforms, but a lot of it is catalog titles, right? And the chart truly reflects what is happening on the streaming platforms. When we incorporated streaming for the first time, as I mentioned earlier, you know, Latin and country are two of the largest growing genres.
They were lagging incredibly far behind.
When we launched the chart, it was like you're going to kill country music now. It's like we're not going to have a place on the chart, and now you know we've had
Look
a
at
record
how things
number.
have changed. And
Yeah. Look out. We had a record number.
that's going to be great for the live stream.
I want a meme of that.
It's already happened.
Yeah. And Latin, you know, we've had a record number of titles in like regional Mexican. Who would have thought regional Mexican music would, you know, have a place atop the Hot 100? I feel the pain of rock music, and it's difficult for that genre, and it's something that the industry struggles with about even getting proper placement on some of the DSPs to really promote it well. But yeah, we acknowledge that there's a lack of some of those titles on the chart, but it's not anything that we can control. We can only reflect what is happening.
So I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to kind of maybe turn it in a different lens. But Justin wants to know, would you consider introducing a separate chart for AI? And I don't know if he means AI based on content that's created by AI or...
I would assume that.
Yeah, no, so take it whichever way you want, but that's...
Yeah, And like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of the new technology and the new ways that music is out
made
there.
by robots.
But like even we talked about gaming, right? And what is happening on the gaming platforms. And I mentioned that our first step would be creating chart specific to what is happening on those platforms instead of immediately trying to find a place for that data on the Billboard 200 or Hot 100.
Immersive.
Yeah, exactly. And something like that, sure, if there's data that is readily available that we're gathering from more than one source, which is always important to us, and that is representative of a large amount of music options, we'd love to do that. And we always want to be where the music fans are. And I think we've shown over the past few decades that we do move in that direction.
Okay. Well, so that kind of closes up our session. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Silvio. Thank you, Billboard, and
Thanks,
everyone
everybody.
that's joining us
Thank
here
you.
today at South by.
The Billboard stage tonight, we have Christian No Doubt, so please show up to. Oh, well, I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
One more thing.
For those of you who really like to follow the Hot 100, we've just launched today the Hot 100 Challenge. So if you go to the hot100challenge.com, you can sign up and you can guess where new music will end up on the Hot 100 for a chance to win prizes. So check that out. Thank you.
Thank you.